Yeah, I guess it's time for another video. And the saga of Zachary, and yeah, it was Zachary Rosh's uh, dramatics, his drama king antics continue to make news. And this was hilarious. This was today. You know, they kicked him out of the floor of the Montana house because there were a bunch of, I think, he said a lot of rhetoric and crap that they had, blood people that legislators who want to protect kids from surgical butchery and want to prevent male cheaters in women's sports. They have blood on their hands. That's all these people are so fucked up. But anyway, he was silenced, and then he was barred, after, there was all those protesters and crap. In other words, this guy violated decorum, and you basically have to kiss ass, okay, and go by the rules in any of these legislatures and in Congress and stuff. This isn't like the UK where they really get into it and they argue and all this kind of stuff. It isn't like that. It isn't like the UK Parliament. You really gotta kiss people's asses. And he's an entitled dude that thinks everybody ought to kiss his ass. And I'm so sick of that whole damn cross-dressing brigade. I could scream. But anyway, and again, they're hypocrites. People that support this guy are total hypocrites because they're the ones that silence and make death and rape threats to women who dare say, we have boundaries and we don't want men to violate boundaries. We don't want our boundaries violated. We don't want our children's boundaries violated. And they get the death threats. So, cry me a river, Zach. Anyway, and then there was this, the Supreme Court eventually, they've only decided a few cases this term, but one of the cases they're going to decide is the Biden student loan relief, the $10,000 relief. And the Republicans threw all these bogus cases out there suing Biden, and it was such bullshit because loans have been forgiven all along the line, and he used the HEROES Act, which was totally legal, completely legal, because it was a national emergency. We had COVID that shut down the country for quite a while, basically 2 years, before it kind of got back to semi-normal. And so this was an emergency, okay? And it seems like they they looked at every possible hole that would be against this. And they said, no, it's totally legal. Of course it's legal. But the Republicans, because this was an election year last year where they started filing these suits, they wanted to get back at him because of the youth vote. But a lot of these crushing debts aren't with young people anyway. They're people like my age who are past retirement age and have old student debt they can't get rid of. Some people my age and older, they have their Social Security garnished to pay off student debt. So we're going to see what happens, but what they found out was the big case is the one in Nebraska, I think, Biden versus Nebraska. And this author looked at it, and found out that the lender, it supposedly was hurting this lender, right? And that's why the Supreme Court should side against Biden's student loan plan, right? Well, the problem was they found out all this documentation that said that the lender would actually make more money. Would make lots more money if the debt forgiveness went through. So there's no argument. They didn't have standing because they weren't hurt. And they aren't going to be hurt because they're going to make money off of it. So can you believe this? And I think what happened here was Biden decided to go right direct to the court, to get this resolved. And, fast-tracked it. And I think that was the reason that it's gone as quick as it has. But yeah, that was supposedly the big case, that was the real powerful argument, and you find out the lender wouldn't have standing anyway. There's no standing to file a suit. And it's just ridiculous. But it was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. They were just trying to make political points by getting their base upset over people getting something for nothing. That kind of crap. And that's what that was all about. That's what those stupid lawsuits were all about. Of course, Biden has the authority. But you never know with this court, because they pull things out of their ass all the time. And speaking of ass, yeah, don't you feel sorry for Sam Alito, who single-handedly destroyed the court's already shot reputation. I mean, it's been shot since the 1990s, when Rehnquist still had it. With Jones versus Clinton, and then Bush versus Gore, and of course when the Roberts court, it just really went down the tubes. And the Dobbs thing was really the the real straw that broke the camel's back. But anyway, but the Wall Street Journal had an interview with Sam Alito, and he thought himself as a victim. So instead of discussing the unpopular Dobbs ruling itself, Alito focused on the leaked draft of his opinion, which he said made him and other Republican appointees targets of assassination. Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah, he's just playing the victim card. So, he can kind of go to hell. He shot his wad. And there's no way to get it back. And let's see. What else? Oh, and then the Surgeon General came out with this report, and it isn't totally full of shit. It might be partly full of shit, because, of course, there's allegedly an epidemic of loneliness. That's depression. Why don't they, instead of calling it loneliness, there's no such thing. It's depression. That's all it is. And not having a partner doesn't mean you're lonely. Who the fuck wants it? But it's just, to me, it's a bunch of shit. It's not entirely shit, but it's largely shit. Lots of stereotypes about older people, single people. But also, look at what happened during the pandemic. And people don't want to get out anymore because they're afraid of ending up getting sick. So, anyway, no, I don't think it's nearly as, because that's a subjective term anyway, loneliness. Cigarettes are not a subjective thing. We know they kill. And so anyway, he came out with this long-winded 82-page report. But again, and somebody on Democratic Underground, they don't often make sense, but someone did make sense, and they talked about, basically, this is about extroversion, if you believe in such a thing, that is the sign of health. You've got to have people all the time. And introversion is a sign of mental illness. That's bullshit. And like they said, it's basically bullshit. Because if an extrovert isn't getting all that feedback, yeah, they're going to feel bad. But an introvert isn't going to feel that bad because they're comfortable being alone. They don't like being in crowds. So being alone or being an introvert isn't the problem. And I am not going to sit here and feel sorry for people. Oh, they don't have connections. They don't have kids. They don't have grandkids. Bullshit. Bullshit. Stop trying to shove the 1950s down our throats. And speaking of the 1950s, Rolling Stone had this nice little article. Look what the GOP's trying to force down now. And Steven Crowder, am not familiar with him, or any of these other ilk guys a lot. But he had a kind of a nasty divorce, and one of their arguments was caught on camera, and you could tell the guy was a damn abusive twat. He was absolutely terrible. He was a jerk. I mean, you could tell it. Entitled thing, and no wonder she dumped him. I mean, you know, there's a limit to what you'll put up with as a woman. And she was pregnant at the time, and he just treated her like shit. It was awful. And so now there's these entitled dudes, they want to control. See, they're losing control of women. That's why all this anti-abortion shit and all this crap. And now they want to go on no-fault divorce. And, you know, that they started doing that in the late 60s. And they want to bring it back to a mythical time when they weren't even born. This is the thing. What do these guys have in common? Now, who are the ones that they mention that blather? Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Tim Pool. None of these people, and I doubt Tim Pool, none of these people were alive in the 50s. So what the hell do they even know what they're talking about? Women were not happy being shoved into the home. They were kicked out of the labor force to make room for the returning servicemen after World War II. That's why they were shoved into the home, and they tried to make a career out of it. And the women couldn't stand it. They couldn't stand having their brains rotted, staying home all day, and being financially vulnerable and having to constantly walk on eggshells. No, you guys, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I lived through that time. I didn't live through the 50s, but the early 60s, up to the late 60s. I grew up during that time, and that was pretty much the same as the 50s. That was pretty much the same, and it was a shit era. Early marriages, teenage marriages, having babies real young, not even being able to have any kind of a job or career or anything. Just let your brain rot to serve a man. These guys love it. A lot of these guys love it, that way of life. Or they look at the television, and I've talked about those television shows back in the 50s. Oh, these idealized families, and I already said those women that were the quote-unquote housewives were career women. They were in the acting profession. And in the case of Donna Reed, she owned her own production company. They were not little housewives that just stayed home having the babies and waiting for the old man to come home and serve him a beer. That's not how it was. And it wasn't even that way with women in general. They were participating in the labor force all through the 50s. So people that talk about stuff that they don't know what the hell they're talking about, they should shut up. But now they're squawking about no-fault divorce because they want to keep women tied to them. They can't tolerate it. There's too many men out there. They're just so screwed up. They can't tolerate. They don't see women as human to begin with, and they just can't deal with it. They can't deal with having to treat women like human beings. And women aren't going to do it. Hey, you want to make it harder to get divorced? You want to make it harder? Women are just going to turn away, just like with abortion. They're not going to have more and more women are going to say to hell with even having relationships. So this is all going to all blow up in your face, you stupid dudes. Anyway, I've kind of run off at the mouth, but that's a variety of articles that have happened in a few days that I thought I'd point out. Old Alito crying crocodile tears. Old Zachary Rosh crying crocodile tears. And our Surgeon General crying crocodile tears about people. And I'm sure, I didn't sit there and read that. I read the blurbs. I'm sure he thinks single people are so lonely and people who are alone are so lonely. So he's crying crocodile tears. And then we have the right that cried crocodile tears over the student loans. And oh, how unfair it was for lenders who were going to make more money. What Biden's forgiveness program. And then, of course, these old blowhards, these jerks that are whining about no-fault divorce because the women are put on this earth to serve them. That's all you're for. You're your very own prostitute. That's basically what marriage is. You know, trade sex for financial support. And the dude, you know, he can screw you at will. You watch, they'll get rid of the marital rape laws too. Because you got some that are running around thinking there's such a thing as implied consent in marriage. So anyway, there's all this flood of crocodile tears. And so I just decided I would comment for now. And I'm already way over time. That's it.